This is a 2015 Jeep Grand Cherokee. I'm going to do the front brakes, pads, and rotors. I did the rears last weekend and found that there are not quite some differences, but quite enough differences to note between the rear and the front. So some of the tool sizes, etc., are different. Of course, the biggest difference is the parking brake is on the rear. What I'm using today, I've got brake cleaner to clean off gunk in general, plus mainly the rotors. I've got penetrating oil on liquid wrench if I need it, just to get into the caliper mounting brake bolts that are really quite hard. I actually use a little bit of brake quiet. I'll show it. It's optional, I think, but I just like to put it on. I've got anti-seize for the caliper bolts, the mounting brake, the mounting bracket bolts. I like to loosen those up a little bit, make them run smooth. And I've got a little tiny bit of brake grease that I just put on the caliper, just to make the brake pad slide a little bit. Okay, those parts, and I've got paper towel. And then in terms of tools, so let me go to the other part. So I've got a brake rotor for the front, and I've got brake pads. Tools, I've got a hammer. I just did the driver's side. I'm doing the passenger side right now. I did not need a hammer this time. On the rears, I needed to absolutely hammer the rotor off. It was just wedged in there with rust and gunk. I did not need it on the front. You need a channel lock wrench to get in the spring that holds the caliper in. I'll show you that later. Little small screwdriver to get an O-ring off the rotor, a big screwdriver to release the spring from the caliper. I've got, this is a difference from the rear. The caliper mounting bracket on the rear, I believe, was an 19 millimeter bolt size. This is a 19, a little bit bigger. So obviously the rear must have been, I think, 17 actually, not 19. I've got a key, an Allen key, a hex to remove the caliper bolts, and on the rear it was 7 millimeters. This one I found is more like 9. You could even put a 10 in, I think that would work. I've got a torque wrench to reattach the lug nuts on the car, and as well you can torque in, not with this is too long, to torque in the caliper mounting bracket bolts and the caliper guide pins. I've got a smaller torque wrench that I'll use for that. I've got a C-clamp. You need to use that to push the pistons back into the calipers. And then I've got this it's a dog leash. I actually use it on the front brakes only to suspend the caliper from getting damaged and stuff. And it's easy when it's installed up high inside the well. You can really get at it with the C-clamp to produce retract the pistons. I jack up the car. I've got for safety, I've got a jack stand down there, and then I'll get to work on the lug nuts. You can use a normal wrench on this, but I actually like to use an impact gun. Some people have written to say, really, you need that? You know what? It saves me probably 5 minutes, maybe 10, putting the bolts on and off. So why not? As I said, that took me 30 seconds to get the whole tire off, or the wheel I should say. Just size this up a little bit. We've got a rotor here, which is quite old. I'm going to actually get this machined after. This rotor in Canada cost me about $100 US. I can get it machined for probably 30, 35, and I'll have another use out of it. That's assuming that it's good for use. So I'm going to take this spring off. This holds it's like an anti-shake sort of thing, and it keeps the outer brake pad tight. There are 2 bolts on each of the top and the bottom of the rotor. So this is a plastic boot, rubber boot with a plastic cap. Use a screwdriver and just pop that. Oh, it'll come right off by hand. Okay, there's a little cap. Just pull that off. And in the back here, there is a top caliper bracket mounting bolt. You can see I sprayed a little penetrating oil on there. I did that because these bolts are really in there hard, and every little bit helps. Try to not get it on the boot. Petroleum-based liquid on rubber is not a good thing. I'm going to wipe that off. And then on the bottom of the caliper, there's a matching pair of these, the boot and the bolt. What I'm going to do is remove the caliper guide pin from the top and bottom, pull the caliper off, reveal the caliper mounting bracket, remove the bolt on the top and the bottom, remove that, and then we'll just pull the rotor off, replace the new rotor, pull the brake pads from the front, or the outer and the inner side of the caliper, and replace those, and reinstall the mounting bracket, put the caliper back in, bolt that in, put the spring back in, and put the tire on, and then we're done. So there's more to it, but I just wanted to size that up there at the beginning. Here's the caliper guide pin coming out, as you can see down there. Spring, you need to get this tab out of that hole. If you get that out, the whole thing will eject. So just take a screwdriver and just shove it in, and you can pull it out a couple of different ways. There you go. Then the caliper should be fairly loose. You'll find probably though that it might be a bit tight, and all I do is I wiggle it and I take a screwdriver and put it in here, and I lever the caliper out. So just be gentle and you'll get it out. There's the caliper off. I just, as I said, I used a screwdriver and just sort of levered it out, and it came out. And then I hang it up here. You can use wire, rope. I actually have a little dog leash that works really well. So I'm hanging it through this hole over the little strut up on the top. And then what I'll do is take a C-clamp. I'll take the flat brake pad from the other side, the outer brake pad, put it on here, attach the C-clamp, and then compress the two pistons. I'll show that. So just take the brake pad off here and place it up here, and then that will exert equal amounts of force on each of the two pistons. There are two pistons on the front of this car, by the way. And I'll get the C-clamp on here and then just squeeze. There's the C-clamp attached, and you can see I'm just going to thread this in, and the piston will slowly retract into the body of the caliper. What you can also do, I did it here, you can open the hood of the car and find the brake fluid, and just release the cap, because pressure is built up. There's high pressure lines with brake fluid from here to the cylinder inside of the hood, and you want to relieve that pressure if possible, because you're going to be pushing brake fluid back through the system. There, the pistons have been fully pushed back, retracted back into the caliper. One thing I did want to mention as well is when you do move this caliper up and around, there's a high pressure brake fluid hose attached to it. Be very, very careful. Don't twist it, break it. Don't suspend this caliper by the hose. You don't want to damage that hose. Just another little thing I want to mention while I'm here. I use that impact wrench to open the lug nuts. You'll find that if you're using a normal wrench to get the lug nuts off, your hand is going to keep whacking this side of the car, and you might scratch it. So what I do is, if I'm not using an impact wrench, I turn the wheels before I jack the car up, and then that gives you a better angle. That's what the inside brake pad looks like. Those two clips fit inside the pistons. Little trick to get at those caliper mounting brake bracket bolts. If you turn the car wheels that way, you can get at it straight on with a wrench. You'll find it a lot easier. So there's one, there's two up there. And I like to put some anti-seize on each of these bolts and run them back through the caliper mounting bracket just until until they run smooth. There's a very thin O-ring, rubber O-ring, around the outside of the rotor. So just get a small screwdriver and just wedge it in and pry that out. The rotors should come off fairly easily. If not, just give it a little whack with a hammer, and it'll break. Spray the outside and inside edges of the rotor with brake cleaner, and then give it a good wipe. You can see why. To put a little anti-seize just around the inside hub, just to make sure the rotor gets off easily next time, and then reattach the rotor. Make sure to put the O-ring back on the middle. I like to put a little bit of grease on the metal clips, and then insert that back into the piston. I didn't show this at the beginning, very important. These are the caliper guide pins. The caliper slides on these things, so what you need to do is purchase a tube of caliper grease, and especially formulated to not react with the rubber boot. If you get petroleum-based grease on here, the boot will expand and just fall apart, which is bad. So the caliper grease is specially formulated to not react, and the caliper can slide. Here, reattach the caliper mounting bracket as you took it off. Take the bolts come out first, then the caliper bracket goes on, then the bolts go through the outside, through the bracket. If you're torque this to 75, 80 foot-pounds. All right, the mounting bracket is back in, so now take the caliper and mount it. All right, reinstall the brake pad in here, and what I like to do is just, again, put a little grease up there, and I like to slide the pad back and forth a few times just to get rid of any gunk that might have built up to make it smooth, ride smoothly. Put back in, and if you're torquing, torque the bolts to 35, 40 foot-pounds, and replace the plastic caps. I also like to put a teeny bit of grease on the caliper slide here, because when the caliper when the brake pad goes in, on both sides, by the way, it slides on this track, and you want it to slide easily. Now make sure you don't put too much, because you don't want it getting on the... to get this spring back in, put the top tab in like this, and make sure this little arm is here. Push this back as far as you can, and then use a channel lock wrench and just squeeze, and you can get that tab in. You probably need a screwdriver. Remember, put the two caps back into the caliper guide pin in the back. You got the O-ring, got the spring, and I'll put the wheel back on. Torque it up to, I think, 9,500 foot-pounds, but look in your, in your manual, whatever you got, and you should be in good shape. Anyways, good luck.